All right, welcome back to Questing Beast, everyone. I'm Ben, and today we are talking to Matt Finch from Frog God Games. Hi, Matt. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
So Matt's joining us because Frog God is in the middle of a Kickstarter to turn Swords and Wizardry, which is one of their best-selling rule sets, into a box set. So I figured we'd talk a little bit about that and a little bit about Matt's background at Frog God Games. So we start off with, you weren't originally, is Frog God Games something that emerged later, or was that something that you started with way back in the Osric days?
Frog God came later. Osric was about, it was 2006, I think, and then about 2010 was when we put Frog God together, and just sort of mixed in the Pathfinder work that they'd been doing there, along with the Swords and Wizardry rule set.
Yeah, because for people who don't know, Osric was a clone of AD&D, right?
Right.
Yeah, and it was the first retro clone that I can think of.
Yeah, it came out with something that was very similar to a retro clone by Chris Gonnerman called Basic Fantasy Role Playing Game. But Osric has sort of become widely known as the first retro clone, and it was more directed toward really duplicating the rules than Chris's was. But Chris came out with something that also had a shared trademark and was based on the OGL. Very similar concept. So.
Yeah, and reading through what I've seen of Basic Fantasy, it's more like BX D&D.
Yeah,
and there's more house rules into it. It's more like its own thing. Whereas my impression is Osric is a fairly faithful clone of AD&D.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that was the idea, was to faithfully clone it. And that's the reason I make the distinction between it. I mean, Osric probably was the first retro clone, but it came out right at the same time as Chris's. So it props to Chris as well. But yeah, I think that Osric was more focused on duplicating a rule set.
So in a lot of ways, Osric and then later Swords and Wizardry and so on kind of created the groundwork for the OSR in the sense that it gave everyone easy to use rules that could be easily shared and built upon. So from there, we have all the, 50 different retro clones or more that there are now.
Yeah,
people just keep making them. Yeah. And there's no signs of stopping. New ones keep coming out. They keep getting more and more deluxe. Like recently there was the Old School Essentials box set. And now there's the Swords and Wizardry box set. Everyone's making box sets. So what was the impetus to turn Swords and Wizardry, which was, that's an OD&D clone, into a box set?
Well, I mean, the very first and most mundane reason was that we're starting to run out of the rule books, and so it was time to either reprint or think about taking a different production direction with it. And so from there, we were just like, okay, well, what do people who play Swords and Wizardry really want? Number one on that list is a box set, because we've been hearing for years and years, we want a box set. The original D&D thing that it clones was in a box set. Let's put it in a box set. And there are also conveniences to having multiple small booklets. There's a different set of conveniences for one large book altogether, but so we decided that we were going to change the look of the rules by putting them in a box. We were going to change the look of, we were going to have specific Swords and Wizardry modules with a more generic setting that came out that was, probably a little bit more swords and sorcery than the Lost Lands, which is the Frog Gods campaign world. And we were going to move to a digest size format. But once again, that's a throwback to the original. But once again, it's really easy to hold a digest size book open in your hand as compared to one that's letter size. So, so that was really what it was. It was, number one, just the restocking issue, and then number two, the rethinking on the whole, what's cool kind of line.
So how is the book going to be broken down into smaller pieces?
Yeah, it's going to be 4 booklets. The content is the same. There were only 1 or 2 little pieces of errata that I went through and put in. But, basically in terms of gaming content, if you've already got the book, you don't need the box set unless you think box sets are cool. It is divided into, there's a player book that contains the character classes and how to play, but not the spells. The spells are in another book so that it's fairly easy for somebody who is a spellcaster just to have that one book open instead of the whole thing. And then your classic monsters book and your referee book is how it's divided. So it's 4 books rather than 3. But
okay. Yeah. So I recently played Old School Essentials, and they do something similar where they break it down into smaller books.
Hmm.
And you're completely right that having that smaller digest format makes it so much easier because you can split it up around the table, right?
Yeah.
Different people need different parts of the book. You can give them the correct part, and you can hold it open in one hand. Like I was running sessions with just a book open in one hand, and I could use my other hand to gesticulate and so on.
Yeah, I mean, we were even trying to get them saddle stitched because which is stapled for anyone who's not familiar with it, because those will lie flat on a table, which would be even better. But it turns out that the books were somewhat too large to be able to do saddle stitching on them. So, and when they get large, they're going to start closing up anyway. So we ended up with the perfect bound ones.
Okay.
But we did put a lot of thought into what the usability of the thing was going to be and how to break it down. And then a lot of the stretch goals, which are all digital, although we'll probably sell printed versions of them later. It's a real bad idea in a Kickstarter to keep changing your plan. But those are also designed for the usability. I mean, one of them's an adventure log for the DM, which because those are always really cool to look
Yeah.
back at. And there's one. They're going to be spell books broken down even further than just that spell book into, here's your character class, here are your spells with the descriptions set out there. And so the digital help with it is going to be, I think, fairly useful as well.
What do you mean the digital help with it?
Well, the stretch goals,
I see. I see.
the little digital stretch goals that are coming out are all pretty useful, I think.
That sounds great. I'm also really curious to see what it looks like. I assume like you had to redo the layout because they have to put them in a
Yes,
totally different
definitely.
format.
Yeah.
So I'd be curious to see what that looks like in order to like help make it more usable. I like the idea of having like spell books where you have each character class ready to go, and just like breaking things down so it's more consumable.
Yeah.
Not that Swords of Wizardry is terribly difficult already. It's very easy to read, but it's nice to have things in a smaller format so there's less page that you have to look at. You can just have like the rules right there. So is this the main, is Swords and Wizardry the main rule set? Do you still sell Osric?
No, we don't sell Osric. In fact, we've never sold Osric. That predated Frog God, and Osric is a very, very it's really, really designed to be as inexpensive as possible, and
Okay.
that's been sold. I think Black Blade prints that out, and we put out the free PDF of Swords and Wizardry to try and get that, to anybody who wants to. But the books they're pretty much market price on those. A lot of the Osric books are even cheaper.
When you run games, do you have a preference for which system you run?
Oh yeah, I like Swords and Wizardry.
Why is that?
It's less complex than AD&D,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of cool stuff to AD&D. I mean, no denying that. And most of the house rules that I put into Swords and Wizardry are from AD&D. But for the base framework of the game, because I like to tinker, I like to riff off of ideas a lot, and it just, original D&D Swords and Wizardry tends to work better than first edition or Osric. There's just less. There's so much less to it. So.
Yeah, that does seem to be like the way that the OSR was going in general. Like there's been a couple other AD&D clones, but from what I understand, not that many people play it. It's usually like either some version of OD&D or BX.
That does seem to be the way that it's heading, which
Yeah.
is interesting. It's really not what I would have predicted, because AD&D was the vast, mass market thing that was out there, and the resurgence of original D&D via Swords and Wizardry, and basic via first Labyrinth Lord and now Old School Essentials, and also basic fantasy role playing game. Chris Gonerman's one. That there are several of the basic ones that are out there, and that surprises me, the simplicity. But I think the thing is that if what you're into it for is the freedom of action of the DM to really describe what's going on in less complex terms and less granular terms, I guess it does make sense that if you're trying to put away this idea of the granular rules, AD&D is going to be one of the things that you may put aside in favor of something that gives you more freedom out there. I mean, I really love AD&D. When I say that I prefer Swords and Wizardry, that's not That's not a hit against AD&D. It's just that Swords and Wizardry and OD&D just match the style that I run a game with. So it's a lot of it's on the fly, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, so what that makes me think of is the way that a lot of people say that the OSR is just based on nostalgia for like the good old days. And it seems to me if that was the case, there would be a lot more people playing AD&D, since that was the really big one. But I think that the move back towards BX or original really goes to show that what people are looking for is a really fast, simple game that's very easy to hack and very easy to run.
Yeah, and in terms of nostalgia, I mean, I think you're right on the money with that as being probably the reason for it, because I never actually played OD&D back in the day. I started with the Holmes Basics set, and then we added on a player's handbook, and we used the monster manual, but at the same time the Dungeon Master's Guide hadn't come out, so everybody had these little photocopies of the stuff you needed to get above 3rd level, and that came from OD&D. But really, I never played original D&D, and so I've gone back further than nostalgia would put me. If it were all about just being who I was in middle school, well, actually I went back to who I was when I was like 7 or 8, which is before I ever started doing this stuff. So yeah,
that's really interesting that it sort of ended up in that space. You mentioned before that there are some house rules in Swords and Wizardry. It's not like a super faithful OD&D clone, although that would be hard to do given how obscure it is. But
the reason that there are a lot of house rules in it, you see, that we kept the ambiguities that were in it. But when we did house rules, for example, the biggest one being initiative, because OD&D didn't have an initiative system, or they said use chainmail. Chainmail simply didn't work with it. And what we did there is, I think we've got something like 6 different initiative systems laid out in there as options, with a description of here's what this one does, here's what the sort of effect on your game is going to be if you pick this one as opposed to that one. So there are not a lot of house rules put into there as if they are part of the system. They're put in as here are your options kind of a thing.
Yeah, I really like that approach, just because it puts more options into the game master's hands. It really enables the kind of hacking that I think a lot of people like to do.
Yeah. And if someone's coming to a game for the first time and it's an unfamiliar game and it involves picking some house rules, that you almost have to give some guidance about here's what this is going to do if you try it, because some of them are more complex, some of them aren't. Some of them it's the party all acts at once and the monsters go. Some of them it goes by dexterity order. So there are a lot of different possibilities there. But it's I think even modern players who head towards Swords and Wizardry are the tinkerers for the most part. They're going to tinker with the rules. They're going to try out different things. So that's what it works for.
Yeah, I really like the fact that you tell them how it's probably going to affect the game. Like, I feel like there should be a lot more RPGs in general that have some kind of developer commentary, where it's just like, here are the rules and here's why those rules are there. And if you mess with them, that's totally fine, but this is going to happen. Just to allow people and kind of give them the permission to mess around with it, so they don't feel like it's just like holy writ that they have to stick with.
But do you think that the reason for that may be that people are trying to affect the reader in such a way that the reader is getting immersed at least as much as they can when you're talking about rules, but without going to that whole new level of here are our rules, but here are some different things, different ways you can use them. Here's the commentary on the stuff. I think it may be that people are just afraid of doing that because they may lose their reader.
That could be. It might overwhelm them with thinking that I'm trying to learn these rules, but now you want me to hack them too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's such a totally different mentality in most of the old school scene, but that's mostly because the rules are so simple.
There's time. There's time for it. Yeah.
It's not like you're trying to hack Burning Wheel or something like that, where it's like 7 million little gears that are all turning in different directions.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, so I was going to ask, what is it like starting up and running an OSR publishing company? Because Frog God Games is like one of the few that has more than one person working there.
Yeah.
You're kind of an oddity in terms of you actually have a successful business with a lot of products, and you've been going for quite a while.
What is it like starting it up? Well, I mean, it's. I think that depends a lot on who the people are, actually, because I think every game company, since you're not doing it for the money, you're going to be doing it, for the most part with friends,
Mm-hmm.
because since you're not doing it for the money, you're not hiring the consummate professionals. You're hiring the people you want to work with. So I suspect that it's different with every company that does that, but um, it is. I don't know. It's a mix of the business side of it, and it's a mix of here is something that I really really want to do, in terms of individual products. The Tome of Adventure Design that I did was something that I had worked on for a long long time. It was sort of my baby. It was a big old stack of tables that I'd built up over the
Yeah.
years. And so that one got priority over other stuff just because it was what I wanted to do. Um, so I mean, it's very free form, but you have to be really careful in this industry if you're trying to build up from nothing, because there are we've seen lots of Kickstarters crash and burn, that ended companies.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen just there are pitfalls out there, and we dodged them. I don't know if it was by chance or if it was one of the things about us is that we don't really have any full-time employees. We've got a lot of part-time people
Mm.
who
Okay.
work. So I think that gives us sort of better antenna out
Mm.
there. On the other hand, it means that we are way disorganized compared to a regular, just staggeringly disorganized.
Like, I'm sure that you've been able to see kind of from the front row the way that the OSR has grown over the years.
Yeah.
Because like Swords and Wizardry, and I mean, you have a lot of OSR products, but you have Pathfinder products too.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that you've probably seen the OSR grow pretty quickly in recent years.
I think so. I, a couple of years ago, it became so large that I no longer really felt like I was following the whole thing
Mm-hmm.
anymore. I mean, you had the art house over on um, help me out here, Ben. What was it called? Google Plus.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so you had that whole approach to the OSR going on. You've got I wouldn't really say it's different communities, the people who are playing the BX type games
Mm.
as opposed to the other stuff. But so you've got the people who are playing sort of the core D&D, either retro clones or even the original rule sets. You got that group, and then you've got another group of people who are inventing games,
Mm-hmm.
using the retro clones as their jump off points. It's become more it's become more diverse at the same time that it's become larger. There are different groups inside it who are doing different things that are they're hooked together by the old school concept, but they're definitely not necessarily the same fan bases for who's doing what.
Yeah. It's really hard to like judge how big the OSR is because it has all of these separate little groups of people that are doing their own thing. People who only do like OD&D as written, and then there's people who are like hacking everything up. The biggest metric that I've been able to see is any awards, because like you go back 6-7 years, no one knew what it was, and then every year since then, I went back and I checked all the Any awards, and every year it's increased. Last year is 17 OSR products nominated for Any awards, which is mind-boggling.
Yeah, I mean, because the
Yeah.
whole community back when Swords and Wizardry won its Any, which was definitely the first of the OSR products to win an Any. It was like it was people on forums were all like, vote for it. I don't care if it's good or not. It's an old school thing. This is us. We're
Yeah.
actually getting up to the to the real mainstream kind of a thing. And so that was, I don't know, it was 2000. I guess it must have been 2007, I guess.
Yeah. So what's in the future for Frog God Games after the box set? Are you have anything else in the works?
We've got at the moment we're busy on a bunch of stuff that we finished the Kickstarters for, like we're wrapping up the layout on Ream,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. I'm not really sure of the order of things. One thing that we've had in the hopper for a long, long time, and it's got to be coming out at some point, the Kickstarter, is for the Gary Gygax's Necropolis. is one of the things we're going to come out with. And we've got a Mesoamerican type of thing going on that I think that may actually be the next one down. It's written by Tom Knaus, and so that is our first foray into that kind of it's one of the Lost Lands areas, so it's not really Mesoamerican, but it's got that feel to it, and it's obviously sort of based on that sort of look and feel, especially for the fantasy. So I think that may be the next one.
So what is this Gygax's Necropolis thing? Is it something that Gygax worked on?
Yeah, it was it's got a couple of iterations. He wrote the first one. I forget if it was for Mythos or whether it was for Legendary Adventures. See if I got a copy. Okay, so here are the. So originally, this is it. It's for Dangerous Journeys, and it's set in. This is deliberately set in ancient Egypt, or he spelled it, with an A-E, but it was very much a parallel world kind of a thing. And so it's got long sections on the gods and so on and so forth in this one. And then after that, which is the reason that that we can publish it at all, was this was a Necromancer Games product of the same thing, where we worked with Gary on that one. And so Frog God has the copyright to that, and we are going to do that for 5th edition.
Okay.
So all of the conversion of that, and like I said, I'm not really sure where we are on that, but we've been working on it for a while. So that's probably the next one after the Tom Knaus one.
So did you actually get to work with Gary at some point?
I never did.
Okay.
No. Bill did. A lot of the people at the company did. I never did. So
okay.
Kind of a shame.
So are you transitioning a lot of your stuff to 5th edition rather than Pathfinder coming up?
Yeah, I mean, excuse me. Pathfinder, we're still supporting the 1st edition of it with various things, because that is one of our big original fan bases. But out of that fan base, a whole lot of those people, especially once Pathfinder came out with 2nd edition, just switched over to 5th and started playing 5th. And so that's really the focus right now is on 5th edition and Swords and Wizardry. But we are still doing Pathfinder versions of a lot of that stuff, and we'll keep doing that as long as there's the demand for it from the fans.
That's really cool. So are you going to be anywhere this year at cons?
Yeah, a lot of them.
A lot of them.
Yeah.
I know that there's a Frog God booth here in Arizona because I see them every year. But yeah,
I'm one of those people who drags themselves out to conventions, and then I have a great time when I'm there. But I have so much difficulty, getting all of the stuff together and doing it. But I'll be at right coming up TotalCon. That's like we're leaving Wednesday, 2 days from now. So
okay. Where's that?
It's in Boston.
Okay, yeah.
And it's a relatively small one, but it's growing really fast. But we've got a bunch. Some of the frogs are up on the East Coast there, and so it's kind of a chance to just get together with them, rather than the other ones that we do that are further to the west. So there's TotalCon, there's North Texas RPG Con. Going to go to ReaperCon this year, which is right after North Texas and in the same city. I'm going to Gamehole Con. We're going to have people at GaryCon. I'm not going to GaryCon this year, but we're going to be there. And I think that is the full list of what I'm doing. And I go to one that's a Houston Games Expo down here in Houston. Last year that was very small. I mean, I think it's like 100 people at that one, but it's fun because they do little panels and things like that, as well as the gaming. So
okay. No Gen Con?
I've never been to Gen Con, never plan on going to Gen Con. The only way I would ever go to Gen Con is if some person at Gen Con gets a real wild hair and decides to ask me as a special guest. Then I would probably kind of have to go if they did that. But other than that, the crowds are so big that I just,
Yeah, I went last year. I'm going to go again this year. It is pretty overwhelming. Just it took me 3 days to see all the booths.
Yeah.
It just goes off into the horizon. You just keep walking. I'm somewhere in here. You don't know where you are. But a lot of OSR people do show up there, so that's a fun time.
Oh yeah, no,
I get
no
to play with
question.
a lot of people that I have never seen except online, so that's always cool. Anyway, so we're up on time now. Thanks for joining me, Matt.
Absolutely, my pleasure, Ben.
So everybody check out the Kickstarter. I will put links down in the description below for the Swords and Wizardry box set. Everyone likes box sets, so if you want a box set, that's where you should go. And I'll see you guys next time. See you later.
Bye, everyone.